She will live with us. My husband brings a pregnant young woman home. When I found out who she really is, I burst into tears. A pregnant stranger showed up at my door, and my husband calmly told me she'd be living with us, sleeping in our bedroom. I thought I was losing everything. Until I found out the truth. When my husband walked into our home, I felt my heart plummet straight into my stomach. With him was a very pregnant young woman. Little did I know that her arrival would turn my whole world upside down. The stranger at my house's doorstep looked half my husband's age. She looked barely 20, maybe 21, with long brown hair hanging limp over her shoulders. Her eyes were puffy and red from crying. Her hands were trembling as she clutched her big belly. My husband, Mark, stood beside her, shifting from foot to foot like a man with too many secrets. The second I opened my mouth, he spoke over me. She will live with us. I blinked. What did you just say? He didn't flinch. I said she will live with us. This is not up for discussion. Ava needs to rest now, she'll be staying in our bedroom. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. Our bedroom? Mark and I had been married for almost 25 years. We had shared everything, endured loss, and built a quiet life together. And now, he had just dragged a pregnant stranger into our home, kicked me out of my own bedroom, and decided she would be living here, all without asking me a single thing. My hands were clenched so tightly I didn't realize I was shaking. I looked at Ava, but she avoided my eyes as if I were the one intruding. I'm not the kind of woman who makes scenes, but for the first time in my life, I was on the verge. Mark, I said slowly, keeping my voice steady. Who is this woman? He looked away. We'll talk later. She needs rest. That was not an answer. I don't deserve to be treated like this, Mark, I said, barely holding it together. I know, he said, his voice suddenly cold. But I can't tell you the truth. Not yet. And just like that, he turned away and shut our bedroom door in my face. Every red flag in the universe shot up. I stood there in the hallway, stunned, feeling like the third wheel in my own marriage. My brain stalled as I wondered who she was, why she was here, and why he looked at her like she was fragile china. My ears buzzed with silence, and my thoughts raced through every worst-case scenario. A mistress. A secret child. A betrayal I never saw coming. I thought I knew this man better than anyone. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling while they whispered through the thin walls. I couldn't make out the words, but their tones were soft, intimate. He brought her tea, helped her to the bathroom, practically hand-fed her, and I even heard him laugh. A real laugh. The kind I hadn't heard in years. Meanwhile, I was a ghost haunting my own home. Mark and I didn't speak for days. He slept on the couch. Ava stayed in our room. I floated through the house, trying to make sense of it all. She ate the food I cooked, said thank you, but nothing more. She used our laundry room, showered in our bathroom, and treated our home as if it were hers. And Mark, my Mark, doted on her like she was made of glass. He even watched her eat, made sure she had everything she needed, and barely glanced in my direction. I didn't know who he was anymore. By the end of the week, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my bags. I didn't cry or scream. I just walked downstairs, looked Mark in the eye, and said, "Tell me who she is. Now. Or I swear to God, I will divorce you and walk out." And you know I never bluff, Mark. My husband looked like a man cornered as fear flashed in his eyes when he saw the suitcases. His lips parted, and he exhaled, about to say something, but before he could get a word out, Ava appeared behind him. She looked pale, clutching her round belly with one hand and holding a folded paper in the other. "Let me explain," she whispered. I didn't answer. I just stared. She stepped closer and held out the paper. The second I saw it, my vision blurred. It was an old, yellowed, and fragile hospital form, its edges worn and frayed, as if it had been handled too many times. My name was on it, and so was Mark's. And under infant outcome, it said, deceased. I stumbled back, breathless. "That's from 20 years ago," I whispered. "The day. The day our daughter. The day that broke us." I felt dizzy, and my voice cracked when I asked, "Why are you showing me this?" Her next words would undo every truth I had ever believed. "Because I'm that baby." I laughed through tears, the kind of laugh that comes from disbelief, grief, and a hope so fragile it hurt. Then, I sank onto the nearest chair. My hands were trembling so badly that I almost dropped the form. My mouth opened, then closed. I couldn't form the words. Mark sat beside me, his eyes red. "I didn't know," he said, barely audible. "I swear. I didn't know until I saw the bracelet." "What bracelet?" I asked. "She still had the hospital bracelet on her wrist," he said. Ava nodded, pulling her sweater sleeve up just enough to show the faded white band, nearly falling apart, but still intact. "My adoptive mother made the nurse keep it," Ava said softly. "She demanded it. She said if she were paying for a baby, she wanted all the original documents. The bracelet, the birth form, everything. When she got sick last year, she gave them to me." I was shaking. She bought you?" "Yes," Ava said. "I always knew I was adopted. But I didn't know the truth until she was on her deathbed. She told me everything. The nurse named Sarah told her a baby had been declared stillborn, and that the mother didn't know she was alive. That she could take the child without the risk of legal adoption." I blinked, stunned. "Sarah, that nurse. She handled my delivery." Mark nodded grimly. "I started digging the moment Ava showed me that form. The nurse is real, still alive, but long since fired. There's an entire chain of illegal adoptions tied to her and the doctor who signed off on your birth records. They were selling babies." I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded in my ears. Ava sat across from me now, arms wrapped around her belly. "I didn't want to come here," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't even know if you'd believe me. But I had nowhere else to go, so I searched for your address, but Mark found me exhausted outside the gas station a few blocks from here, and when I told him everything, we went to get a DNA test before coming back." I looked at her again, really looked this time. The shape of her nose. The arch of her brow. There was a familiarity in her face I hadn't noticed before, a mirror of my younger self. I remembered what she looked like when I first saw her on my doorstep, not just scared, not just pregnant. She was lost. And she was mine. I didn't want to say anything until we were sure. I was waiting for the DNA test to come back before we tackled the matter, my husband explained. I reached across the table, my fingers trembling as I touched her hand. "I spent 20 years mourning you," I said, choking on the words. 20 years believing I lost you." Tears fell freely down her face. "I never thought I'd have a mother," she whispered. My voice cracked. "I never thought I'd have my daughter." A few days passed, though I couldn't really tell if it was 3 or 4. Everything blurred together. Mark kept his distance, as if he were afraid I would disappear if he got too close. Ava stayed quiet, always apologizing for the space she took up, the food she ate, the fact that she was there at all. "I don't want to ruin your lives," she kept saying. She didn't understand that she had given my life back to me. When the DNA test returned positive, I couldn't stop looking at her. Ava sat in the living room each morning, curled on the corner of the couch, her hand resting on her belly like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. She didn't act entitled, bitter, or even demanding. She was just soft. Wounded. Ava had grown up without a real family, had no one left, and had now found the 2 people who should have raised her, decades too late. Mark began staying up late, digging through old files and making phone calls. I once caught him in the garage, yelling into the phone about the nurse, the doctor, the illegal adoption chain, and something about court records being sealed. He was trying to find answers. Justice. I, on the other hand, just wanted healing, but we both wanted Ava to be safe. One afternoon, I found Ava crying in the guest room. She'd switched there the moment I found out the truth, refusing to take up our bedroom again. I knocked and then let myself in. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by baby clothes we had just picked up from the store. "I don't want to cause any problems," she said, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I swear I didn't come here for money or anything. I just didn't know where else to go. I slept at the train station for 2 nights before I ran into Mark. I had nowhere to go." I sat down beside her. "You're not ruining anything." She looked at me, hesitant. "You're not mad?" "I'm heartbroken," I said honestly. "But not at you." She let out a shaky breath, then reached for one of the tiny onesies and folded it with trembling hands. "Do you want to come with me to my next checkup?" she asked suddenly. They said I could bring someone. Something cracked open inside me. Of course, I helped her choose a pediatrician, made a list of baby names with her, and even drove her to prenatal yoga classes. She was nervous all the time, convinced she was doing everything wrong, but I assured her she wasn't. Every time I touched her belly, she held her breath, like she couldn't believe anyone wanted to love her. Once, while we waited at the clinic, she whispered, "I never thought I'd have this." I looked at her and smiled through tears. Me too. One night, near the end of her pregnancy, a storm rolled in. Mark was asleep on the couch, but I stayed up in bed reading when I heard the knock on my door. "Mom?" Ava's voice came through the crack. I opened it, and she stood there, clutching her side. "I think it's starting. The baby. It hurts." I flew out of bed. Okay. We're going to the hospital." "No," she said quickly, grabbing my hand. "Not yet. Can you just stay with me for a bit?" We lay together in her room, my arms around her, counting the minutes between each contraction. I rubbed her back. She cried into my shirt. We stayed like that for hours, wrapped in the kind of closeness only pain and forgiveness can build. By sunrise, she was screaming. Mark drove us to the hospital. But in the delivery room, it was me she asked for. "Please. I want you with me," she whispered, white-knuckled and drenched in sweat. I held her hand, whispered encouragements, wiped her forehead, and all the while, I remembered the day I thought I lost her. I remembered the sterile white walls, the doctor's blank face, the lie that shattered my soul. Now here I was again, in another hospital room. But this time, she wasn't being taken from me. She was giving life. She screamed through the final push, and when her baby boy finally arrived, the room fell silent. Then came the cry. Loud, new, and beautiful. A nurse placed the baby in Ava's arms, and she sobbed so hard her body shook. I could hardly see through my tears. She looked at me, then back at her baby, then back at me again. "Mom," she whispered, "will you help me raise him?" I reached for them both and pulled them into my arms. "Of course I will." That night, I stood by the window of the hospital room, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold. Mark stood beside me, silent. "She looks like you," he said finally. "You know, when you were younger." I nodded. "I keep thinking," he added, "what if I hadn't gone to that gas station?" "What do you mean?" "That's where I saw her. That day," he said. "She was outside, sitting against the wall, looking half frozen. I was just getting gas. When I saw the hospital bracelet, I couldn't believe it was still on her. Then I saw your name." My chest tightened. "She looked so lost," he said. And something in me just knew. I wasn't certain that she was ours, but I felt it. "And you brought her home?" I had to. We stood in silence for a while longer, then turned to look at the hospital bed, where Ava slept with her baby tucked beside her. Our grandson. Our miracle. We spent the next few weeks slowly, carefully rebuilding. Ava stayed with us. She never demanded anything, she always asked before doing something, and always tried to make herself shrink to make room. But I wouldn't let her. "You don't have to be small anymore," I told her once. "You're safe." She smiled and cried simultaneously. Mark continued in his pursuit of justice. He contacted authorities, reporters, and anyone who would listen. The case is still open, and we may never recover those stolen years. But in the meantime, we have her. We have him. One day, while holding my grandson in the backyard, Ava turned to me and said, "Do you think he'll have a better life than I did?" I smiled. "He already does." And in that moment, as the sun lit up the garden and Ava's laughter rang through the air, I realized something. Sometimes miracles don't arrive the way you expect. What would you have done if you had been in my shoes when Ava had shown up at the door? Have you ever uncovered a life-changing family secret? How did it affect you?